Welcome makers! I'm Catherine Harris with Stitchery, and this week I wanted to share with you a pattern review as well as a sew along, and it's a pattern from Moments by Liz, and it's called the Zip and Go laptop case right here, and it fits a smaller laptop, about I believe 15 inches. Now my laptop is much larger than that, and I didn't realize that until I was done, but it does fit my pattern book quite nicely. I think it's pattern drafting for menswear. It's got a nice front pocket here. In the back, you've got a lovely pocket here, which actually fits your cell phone perfectly. And I have one of those large Samsung phones. And then we've got a big internal pocket, and it's got some nice cushioning to keep the laptop safe. Well, my book here. So let's get to it. Bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum. So to start with the main pouch. So you're going to take your fabric and you're going to put your fusible interfacing on the wrong side. Now I used spray 505 adhesive as well as another layer of canvas just to thicken up my material because it was a very lightweight fabric that I was using. Next, you're going to use the cutting lines on the pattern to cut the front of your pouch in two. And don't forget to match the notches, because we'll be using those later. Next, we're going to find the center. Now that's marked on the pattern, but it is also easily done by folding it in half. That way we can line up our zipper perfectly when we go to center that in later. So next, we are going to do the lining. So you're going to select your lining fabric, use some fusible interfacing. I use a stiffer one, and then you're going to use foam stabilizer. This is not foam stabilizer, but this is what I had on hand. It's actually some quilt batting, and I'm just using my 505 spray adhesive to adhere this to my lining. That way we don't need to pin it too much, and it stays nicely when we're doing the quilting. So next, we are going to quilt this. Now you can use your walking foot. I didn't need to, the layers aren't that thick, but if you're using that foam stabilizer, you're going to want to put your walking foot on. Little tip when you're quilting, start in the middle of the item, and then you're going to go down in opposite rows. And I quilted in this grid pattern. This is also when you're going to want to put your label on if you're putting a label on the inside of your laptop bag. And now we're on to the outer back pocket. So that's the one that I put my cell phone in earlier in the video. So you're going to take your two pieces, one lining and one of your main fabric, which I've also interlined and interfaced. And then we are going to place our clips here, and then we're going to stitch along the top and the bottom. And so it'll look like this, and we're going to turn it right side out. And you could leave your pocket just like this, but in the instructions, it talks about offsetting it just slightly along the top to create that piping effect so that your lining peeps out, and I absolutely love this idea. So you're going to clip this in place, and then you're going to top stitch along the top edge as well as the bottom edge of your pocket. And so that's what it looks like when it is all done. Now we're going on to the straps. Now, traditionally, I would use contact cement for this. With my Leathercraft, I didn't have that. I'm actually using a faux vegan leather, and I am placing some double-sided adhesive tape on some 3/4 inch webbing. Now, the pattern calls for 1 inch webbing to be used as straps, but I wanted something a little bit more luxurious than a webbing strap on this laptop case. And so I'm just placing that adhesive, and it would work a lot better if we did have that contact cement, because when we push it down, you would really see the indent of where that webbing is. Now, because it doesn't have that adhesive all the way around, I'm just using my leather burnishing tool to burnish the edges so I have a good stitching line on where I need to stitch. Next, I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side, and I'm going to stitch that down, and I've also stitched the ends, fully encasing the webbing. And then I'm going to use my leather rotary cutter And I am just going to trim the edges as close to those edges as possible. And you can finish the edge with finishing. And I also measured it. It comes out to 1 inch. And then you're going to want to cut one at 16.5 inches and one at 30.5 inches. Now onto the front pocket. So this is the piece that we cut in half before. And now we are going to measure 1.5 inches from the top of our pocket and 4 3/8 of an inch from either side. And then we're going to draw a line, and that is where our webbing is going to come. And excuse that pocket, that was for the back. This is actually just for the webbing. And we're just going to draw the side pieces here, and then the shorter handle that we had at 16.5 inches is going to go on this side. So we're just going to clip it along the bottom and clip it in place, and then we are going to ensure that it is 6 inches apart from end to end, and then we're going to sew a little box along here, just going over that. Now onto the back pocket. So on here, this is where we're going to do 1.5 inches down, as well as the 4 3/8 of an inch on either side, and it should be about 2 inches up from the bottom. This will give you a nice little rectangle in here, and I'm just double checking that. So you want it to really be centered. Then you're going to place your pocket on here. And I am using pins because the recovery on this fabric is actually quite nice, even though it's waterproof and I poked a hole in it. But you're not really going to tell because we are going to go over this with our strap. So I'm placing the double-sided adhesive tape on here so that we can lay our straps down. I'm double checking with the top to make sure that the straps line up perfectly before I fully set it in place. And then I am going to place the straps on here following the line. And this is the 30.5 inch strap. And then I'm going to double check again that it lines up, which it does. And then we're going to do the exact same thing as we did before and sew a box line going all the way down up to where that top of that marking is. And you've got your next handle and the pocket done. Now for the front zipper pocket. So with this one, we are going to cut our zipper length out, and then we are going to mark the edges as per the pattern for the stitch lines. And then we're just going to mark that exact same stitch line on our zipper tabs. We're just going to pin that in place, or you could use clips. Then you're going to stitch down on either end. And once that is stitched, you're going to fold it over, and then you're going to stitch it one more time, top stitching them on the ends, and that completes your zipper tab. It should look like this. Now we're going to place the zipper tab in place. Now we're going to fold this exactly in half and mark the center on both ends. Then we're going to line up those marks that we made earlier when we marked the center. And you're going to place the zipper right side facing the exterior of your fabric. And then you're going to grab the lining piece that we had cut out. And that is going to go on top, and you're going to sandwich those together, and then you're going to stitch all along here. So you've got the zipper sandwiched in between. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to finger press that down so everything looks quite nice. And then I'm just pinning in place because it works nicely. But if you're using a different type of faux leather or actual leather, you won't be able to pin that. You'll just have to be careful when you top stitch. Next, we're going to take the front panel here, and we're going to line it up right sides facing on top of the zipper, stitch that in place to baste it, and then we're going to add our lining piece on top of that, sandwiching it just like we did the piece before. And then we're going to stitch across there. And now this one is slightly different than the other one because we are not going to top stitch it through all of the layers. We are just going to top stitch it on the lining side. So make sure you have pulled the other side out of the way before you do that top stitching. And this is what it should look like. Next, we are going to stitch the lining pocket in place. And so we're going to pin that in place. Now I am marking a gap here that is several inches wide because that is where we're eventually going to turn the entire bag out through. So it's very crucial that you leave a little hole in the bottom here so that we can turn it. And don't forget to backstitch. Now notice that there is a bit of a gap there because you can't get too close to the edge just because of the bulk. Don't forget to trim your seams. And the last thing we're going to do is we're just going to stitch along where we have the zipper ties just to flatten it. Now for the gusset and the main zipper for the pouch. So you've got a long gusset piece that I have used fusible interfacing as well as interlined as well, and I'm just marking the 1/2 inch on either side of the zipper tape, and we're stitching it the exact same way that we did the zipper on the other side. The only difference is this is now going to be a long hoop. So you've got a nice little circle, and we're just going to top stitch that on either end like we did before. And then I'm just double checking that the zipper measures 20 inches from zipper to zipper on that gusset, and then you should have the exact size that we need. Then remember those markings that we did earlier? That is where the ends of the zipper are going to go, and you're going to clip that all the way around. And you'll notice that I do have a seam at the bottom there. For whatever reason, it did not match up exactly, so I just created a seam and stitched that on. I'm just clipping the curves here. And when you stitch this gusset on, make sure that you don't catch that pocket. And then we're going to place the back on, and you'll notice I put the handle inside the pocket because we don't want to catch the handle. Stitch that in place, and now you will see I'm just turning this right side out. And I'm just double checking that the zipper works nicely, which it does. And then I am going to attach the lining. So I'm just folding the back of the bag away, and then I'm going to sandwich in the lining pieces. And we're going to do that the exact same way that we sandwiched them in for the pocket, but we're only going to stitch the top portion of the lining. And we're going to do that for the front and the back. So you see how I pulled the other side away, stitched that on. So we've got our lining pieces, and you've got the mark on the pattern that you're going to stitch to. And now we are going to fold the lining pieces together, and I am going to grab some clips to clip and pin this in place. Now it's very important that you try and get as close as you can to the edge of that zipper. You're not going to get fully there because there is going to be a great deal of bulk. So you're going to stitch all the way around. Now, because you do have an edge, we are going to actually stitch outwards from where that stitching line ends. So I've stitched outwards, and then I'm going to create a small clip, and you're going to want to clip in the seam allowances, not on the other side that's closest to the bag, or you'll have a clip in your good side of your fabric. Next, that hole in the front pocket, we're going to pull the bag, and we're going to basically birth our bag. We're just going to pull that all right side out, and pushing out all of the corners that we have, and then we are going to fold this over, give it a nice good press, and stitch it. And then we can place that back in. And our bag is now complete and ready for us to use. So you can see it's got the nice big front pocket, which is probably the safest place for your phone. That being said, this fits my phone perfectly, though it might fall out if you're, jostling around a little bit. And there you have it, a laptop case that you can make yourself. And I thought I would go through some of the things that I liked and didn't like about this pattern. So specifically, what I absolutely loved was the intuitiveness of the instructions in this pattern and the way things were laid out. Typically, when you see patterns like this, you'll have them getting pulled through the lining, but in this case, it was actually pulled through the pocket lining, and then it was stitched close, creating a more of a seamless finish on the inside. I love the fact that she took consideration into placing the foam layer on and actually quilting that in place so that it doesn't move. And one tip here, don't forget to use a walking foot. And just the construction of it along with the gusset is just very nice. It comes together nicely, and it's something that I could see making a lot more of, and I would like to make it in a slightly larger size so that my laptop can actually fit. And I'd love to hack this so that it has some straps so it can also be a crossbody style as well. And I think that that's something I am going to do later. Another thing that I really liked is the back pocket. It is the perfect size for your cell phone, and I have one of the larger Samsung phones, and it fits so nicely in there. And now on to some of the things that I didn't like about the pattern. Well, there wasn't too much I didn't like about the pattern. I absolutely loved all of it. The only tricky part was when you were stitching the inside lining, trying to get close enough to the zipper, but they solved that issue as well by stitching out towards the salve edges of the seam allowances and then creating a little notch. Now when you flip it out, you can kind of see on the inside just a little bit that the lining doesn't go quite to the top, but you know how you fix that? You just put in a couple of hand stitches in there and it'll hide it completely. Other than that, I really like this pattern. And it's also a bag that you don't have to use with a leathercraft pattern. I love doing leathercraft, but it is rather time consuming. And with this pattern, we can switch it up. You can use quilting cotton, you can use faux leather. Really the sky's the limit. I absolutely love it. I ended up using this fabric from Minerva, and it is a pull fabric, so it is 100% waterproof and is actually rather fine. I was originally going to do a big giant skirt out of it, but then thought, how often am I going to wear a waterproof skirt? So I decided to go with this bag, and I think I'm going to make a backpack as well because I have a little bit of the fabric left over from this to match the backpack. So I did interline this to make it a little bit more sturdy, and I think that that really helped, but I don't think you'll need to interline it if you're using something that's a little bit thicker. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up, and if you haven't done so already, consider subscribing. Until next time, makers, let's get our Sew-Spiration on.